Exciting.
I know. I'm so excited to be here today with you, Patricia.
Thank
Um,
you.
Hello. If you are joining us live, I am so excited to be here today with Patricia Regier. Am I pronouncing your last name right?
Regier, but
Regier.
Everybody makes it French, so that's
I'm so
okay.
sorry.
That's okay.
I pretend that I've got the
Yeah,
French background being from Canada. No.
yeah.
Patricia Regier, and we are talking specifically today about her new book, The Online Shift. So many of us, many people transferred into doing online speaking and online workshops and meetings when the pandemic hit. But people like Patricia have been doing this long before it became like the thing we had to do. And so she is an expert in using behavioral science and psychology to really create awesome online engagement. So she has written her new book. She has an awesome YouTube channel, which we will share in the link because you're going to want to go there after you watch this to get other tips and tutorials. But today we are going to talk all about like what are the best tips for engaging your audience online. And so if you are here today, we're going to be asking you some questions. We're going to want to hear anything you find challenging. But we're going to start with the question that we always start with at Blue Rebel Works. Our mission is to make work awesome. So Patricia, I will ask you, and if you are here online with us today or in the replay, what is making work awesome for you this week?
I
Patricia.
love that you start your podcast this way. Such a great question. There are two things that are making this week really great for me. First of all, I have a big to-do list item that I'm finally going to finish accomplishing today. So it'll be out of my head, stress-free for the weekend, and finally getting to that point. And of course, it's tax time, and that's something that just hangs over. But aside from getting a to-do list item accomplished this week, as people are telling me that their book has arrived, it's really just filling my heart, and that really just makes my week amazing.
That is so exciting. Yes, like this, how long did it take you to write this? I'm curious. How long was it in the works?
I started it 2 years ago when
Wow.
the pandemic started. I was then had to sift through 5 years of content and pro tips and things I had been sharing, but I'm really glad I didn't push it out right away because over the last 2 years, helping a lot of people shift online, additional pro tips were coming out, and it really helped evolve and shape the book to be as user-friendly as possible and really what people are looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So I can imagine that feeling when people are getting this with your 5 years of content, 2 years of writing, and now people are finally getting it in their mailboxes and like reading and learning from you. So I love it. So awesome. That is definitely a make work awesome thing that's happening. For me, one thing that's making work awesome for me this week is that we just had a session yesterday with a group. I don't do as much facilitation anymore, but we're at I think our third or fourth session with this group. And we just had such really great conversations about
Awesome.
feedback. And I always leave those really energized and feeling like it's so great to help and make an impact. So yeah, that's making
Definitely.
me.
That's fantastic. Yeah,
Yay.
those are good weeks.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's regarding what we're talking about today, which is
Yeah,
engaging people online.
that's
So,
right.
what made you write this book? Like here, it's all about the online shift. So, if you can't read, I'm going to just read the
Yeah.
subtitle here. 101 pro tips for online facilitators, workplace trainers, and virtual speakers. So, tell me a little bit about what made you write the book. Why now?
Well, as I mentioned, the book really evolved over the last 2 years, and so many pro tips were coming out through videos and blogs and working with different clients. And I had a course already that covered 5 waypoints through the learning experience journey And a colleague friend in my writing group, it was a light bulb moment for me, mentioned that why don't I take my pro tips, because I always wanted it to be a pro tips book, and create it in the sections that followed those 5 waypoints for the learning experience journey, which seemed obvious, but I really wanted this book to be that pick your own adventure, easy to pick up, grab a couple quick tips, apply them, and go back, and you can start at any chapter and really just be a book that is useful and relevant, and not daunting when people are really just needing something fast. So this book then, evolved, and over the 101 pro tips, I kept giving more tips to my publisher. So we then ended up with 9 additional hot bonus tips in there too. So it's just, a real pleasure to just share this knowledge with everyone.
Yeah. And that's what when I got this, I was just like, I love how practical it is. I love how, the tips are simple enough that it's quick to understand it and I can put it into practice like immediately. And the way you've divided up into those 5 areas, and you said like they seem common sense, I think you said, but like, honestly, not everyone is good at these things, even 2 years into a pandemic. So not everything really is common sense. And I know I've been to some events where I'm like, what is happening right now? Like, and I'll ask you about some of your stories, and maybe we'll share some, like what we've seen go wrong and that sort of thing, because it's not all common sense. And what
you're right.
You're thinking about everything, because I come from a guest experience background. So whenever I worked in hospitality for many years, and I'm so passionate about creating a full experience from the time someone like registers for an event, if I'm doing a conference or something, to like as they walk in the door. And I'm going like I'm speaking in terms of live in-person events right now. Like, what happens at that registration desk? How are we making them feel special? What's the first thing they see when they walk in the room? And bringing all of that thinking, all of those touch points into the online world is something you've done with those 5 kind of phases, and like really thinking about the details. I love it.
Thank you. You're right. It's not all common sense. For me, it was a light bulb of, well, of course I would follow, the way I'd structured my course, but I wasn't thinking of that for the book initially. So that's where, that was that light bulb moment for how it was then, structured. But you're right. Thinking about in person, offline, we wouldn't leave people outside the door, but and open the door just at the time that we're going to start. So sending those messages into the waiting room, and just thinking about that stage of welcoming people and warming them up is one of those areas that we do miss sometimes in the online context.
Yeah. And I think you just maybe in the last few days released a new YouTube video talking about the Zoom welcome video feature, right? Definitely. So that's the other thing I love, because so Patricia and I have known each other for a while. We know each other through a professional speakers organization that we're both members of. And Patricia has supported me in a workshop that we did for our clients. So we actually we go way back. And so I've been following Patricia for a while, and your when you go live or to try out a new feature, or like whether it's on Instagram or YouTube, I love watching your lives, because one of my values is authenticity. And you write in the book about the one when you went live and you didn't know how to close it down at the end. And I was like, so freaking relatable. Like I have totally been there.
Still happens sometimes.
Yeah. But you're releasing as new features come out. So like the tech side, but also just tips on showing up, our really presence. Thank
you. I appreciate that. Yeah, sometimes I just hit record when I'm creating a tutorial. It's not always live streamed. Some of them are and some of them aren't. And when I'm creating the tutorial and piecing them together, it can be quite complex so that but it's a great way for me to test it and try out how does it actually apply for us as facilitators. And while I was trying it, the recent one with the waiting room video, I learned some things which then were added into the blog and didn't even quite make it into the video tutorial, because the learning is ongoing as we're testing things, what works, what doesn't work, what do we need to change or tweak.
Yeah. Well, and that, like, those details and the way technology is changing all the time, having someone who is trying those things out, someone that you can follow and trust, is really great in today's world. So that's awesome. Okay. So wanted to write it because of the, like, really practical tips, getting these tips out all in one place. As you've been, kind of watching what's going on in the online space or doing your own things, what have been some of your most valuable learnings? Or, like, were there things that went wrong for you, or what do you see going wrong? Tell me something that's gone.
Probably a good number of the tips and what ends up being put out is because something went wrong. And there was a learning and a lesson that I just wanted to tell everybody so that they didn't have to go through that. And so much rich learning is ongoing. Technology, as you said, is constantly changing. So a couple things come to mind. First of all, I always encourage people to try things, to be intentional in trying to make engaging, interactive spaces when we're learning or meeting together. And I was trying out a new icebreaker activity, warm up. And no matter how much we prepare and practice and we're ready, with a live group, you just don't know. Every group is different. And I was explaining the instructions, going probably a little too fast because I was a little bit nervous, because it was the first time trying this particular activity. And all of a sudden on my PowerPoint slide, the words were being written too fast, or no, it was slowed down all of a sudden. And it's, like a ghost was writing. And that's the beauty and magic of live. We had a good chuckle, not at the person, because they didn't realize that everybody could see it. I had just showed them how to use annotation. So it was great, and because we were talking about facilitation, I just used it as a perfect, opportunity. That is the magic of live, that you can use what's happened in that moment. I will slow down next time, but you can have fun with the experience and really truly be in that moment all together.
I love that. Yeah, turning that right into a learning moment, right, as it's happening. I'm just going to pop a question up for anyone who's watching live or in the replay. What do you find most challenging when it comes to engaging an online audience? Are there things you hear, Patricia? Like, I know I hear people saying, like, when people's cameras are off, that's challenging. Or, like, what are some things that you find come up for people? Is there any specific things that come to mind for you?
Yeah, the cameras off, especially for facilitators that had to shift online and are used to the in-person seeing and reading off the body language and the energy of the room. That's the toughest for speakers and facilitators. And even though there's good reasons why sometimes people have their cameras off, I recommend to be really intentional on the activities. That there's one activity that I like to use with groups where, grab an item and show it on camera, and why is that important to you? And if you build in those opportunities to encourage people and welcome them and invite them onto camera, but then to not exclude the people that can't turn on the camera, that they can use an alternate option of typing in chat, or always give those different options. And, another recommendation is to always turn on closed captioning. And make the spaces as inclusive, cover the navigation. When some of those key things are missed, we could be missing one, even a couple people in the audience, to not turn them into a participant because they can't. And they need those alternate options if the emojis, the like symbol isn't working for them, like give that alternate option, and just really think about that space.
Yeah, I know in your book you talk about things like testing the technology from different, like from your phone, from different platforms and things. And that's one thing that we have found over time, because we use Zoom for our workshops, but then sometimes a participant joins from the browser, not from the Zoom app, and they have different options. So always being ready with, like, if you're on the browser, you'll have to do it this way, and like having those options. There's so many details to think about when you are online.
Definitely. I see it. Something came in chat from a LinkedIn user. Perfect. I love that you can bring that up on screen. Yes, the distracting people, answering emails, checking Facebook, too many things available on the screen during Zoom meetings. Definitely. There's such an opportunity for distraction online in particular. So we need to be even more intentional to try to really draw in people. That's not a passive learning experience, that it's a collaborative space, whether it's a meeting or a learning event or training, that we have, it comes down to having as many things in our toolbox and intentional, interactive activities too. But so that we can try to pull people away and encourage them to shut those things down. It makes a better experience for, even depending on their internet strength. If they have too many things open, it's going to impact if they can watch the video clip that you're inserting and things like that.
I know we often start with some sort of check-in with any group that we're doing, and it's often just like a check-in in the chat. So everyone, and you talk about this actually in your book too, about like getting them using all that, like click the green check mark to show. So you're checking that the technology works as people are checking in, but we'll often use a chat check-in. And one of the questions that we use very often, and I think I heard this from Michael Bungay Stanier first. I'm not sure if it's from him. So if you know, let me know. But it's basically, on a scale of 1 to 10, how focused and engaged are you prepared to be for the next hour or 2 hours, whatever the long it is. And then whatever number they give us, I ask them, like, what's one thing to move that up a notch? Like maybe that's closing your Slack channel, or shutting down your email, or, closing the door, because there are so many distractions. So how can you just get people to have the intention of focus at least? Right?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Those are great questions and ways. And then people are buying into it and making that choice themselves, and they're part of that instead of being told. That's great. That's a great way to do that.
Choose your way to be more present, right? Okay, awesome. Now I am curious. So you have the 5 elements within, or the 5 kind of, I would call them like phases almost of like the whole experience. From promo to, they're all 5 P's: promo, preparedness, prelude, presence, and promise. Can you maybe give your top tip or an example of each? Like, what would be, let's start with the promo phase.
So with the promotion, it's not marketing per se. It's more that calendar invites and the links, and even that pre-course information that just builds the enthusiasm and knowledge, that so that people show up, and that making it as easy as possible to show up. So that would be part of that, bite-sized learning, and those links and calendar invites. Those are the stumbling blocks.
Yes. So having that engagement even before people are there, so that you're kind of creating an expectation and starting the experience even before the event happens. Awesome.
And then for prepared, part of it too is those welcome messages in the waiting room. It's sort of that before information too, if people are going to have, or the emails that you send out, if people are going to have potential tech issues that day with their internet or power, whatever it is, what are the backup options? So to join on their phone, to have the phone in number and meeting code and password, because it's not just a link. And some of that with the prepared, or even to know, if they are calling in, what needs to happen to get them into breakout rooms and things like that. So that's part of the prepared, so that people don't drop off before they even really fully start.
Yeah, so important, because we know that there's always going to be something that goes awry with tech, right? So yeah, having all the tips up front is so important. That's a great one.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then that prelude, and we've already talked about too, everything from the waiting room engagement of, welcome, so glad you're here, just acknowledging people too, that they're there. And then when they enter the room, that warm beginning. It's always a tricky balance between the navigational piece and wanting people to feel prepared and included. Do they know how to use all the actions, but also wanting to jump in with that warm, round tables. So I often recommend too, if it's a meeting and you're going to be meeting for multiple times, you want to get to know each other. And when we're not around a physical table, when I've attended different conferences too in breakout rooms, I've often suggested, well, how about we say the name of the next person? So you're not waiting, okay, who's going to volunteer next? And just make it efficient and keep it going, but not skip that whole beginning part of turning on the closed captioning. Just it's an important busy time
Yes.
in the experience.
Yeah. One thing I did recently with a group, I was their keynote speaker, but it ended up being like their speaker for their whole conference. And what we did was, when people joined the meeting, we had everyone in gallery view so that you could see each other, so we could engage and talk as they were joining. But we also had a slideshow playing that was, what do they call it? Spotlighted. And so the slideshow was an auto slideshow that was going through all the tech pieces, so that they
Good. At
could
the same time.
so we could be talking, but if you needed the tech help, there was the slideshow. So I would mention it every few minutes and make sure. And we found that was so helpful, because some people, needed and we could have screen grabs on there so they knew how to find the buttons. And that was something we found worked really, really well.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, the visuals are important, and people trickle in. So that's a great idea to have that going while you're doing the warm up chit chat, and that's good.
Yeah,
That's a good way to do it.
We're always learning, and we're always, you mentioned earlier, like, try things, right? We're constantly trying a new thing, and that didn't work, but that did. And what can we learn? It is like learning agility. It's the number one skill I think we all need nowadays.
Yes, definitely.
Oh boy. What about presents? This is my favorite part, by the way.
Yes.
Like,
good. Yeah. That's great. Sometimes that's hard too, when people are, they've got so many things going on, to be, bring that energy, and you almost need to knock it up a level online, but still be really genuine. So, whether that's turning on music, like I've had some music playing before I jumped on here, and some of and just, the prepared. But one of the first things that I had to learn 5 years ago when I started creating YouTube videos, and I was not as comfortable on camera. I could have talked in front of live audience in person, 1,000 people, there's nerves, but I was there. But on camera, it was such a shift. And I did that already, 5 years ago. So I actually put googly eyes on both sides of my camera when I first started, because I was used to eye contact. And instead of looking at myself, I had to train myself, because that replay, or now people feel more that I'm talking to them than if I am, not naturally, we do want to look down. I want to look at you, or we look at ourselves, but that is such a different feel than when I'm looking directly into the camera as well. So, it's little things. Start where you are, and build from there, and give yourself grace too, that, it's a learning curve, and we're at different points of it sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I find myself doing in Zoom meetings in the gallery view is I set it up so that there's a video right under my camera. That's nice. I move whoever's talking to that space, so that I'm always like, I'm looking as close to the camera as possible, but I'm seeing them. So it's like it is that feeling like you're together. And I also find as a speaker, like when I'm speaking to groups online, I really try to look at the camera, but especially if there's something I really want to highlight to them, I'm like right in the camera to like focus. So knowing where that is and focusing your eyes there. I also for me and I don't know if I tagged, if you can see that I liked the book.
Awesome.
I tagged that I brought in here. But I was just, let me see if I did tag the one that I was about your energy. So because one of the things that you mentioned, you kind of have to be a bit bigger when you're online. And so the people watching this in the live or in the replay won't know this, but before we came on, I was like stretching, and I always do this. I talk about this oftentimes on when I speak, because there's nerves no matter what, and like to like bring yourself into this kind of presence state and watching your energy. And I also have little post-it notes depending on what do I want to be like.
That's great.
Like really like setting my intention for what energy am I bringing to this conversation, and like that presence piece. I think we don't think about it as much maybe online, but I think it's more important because it's less natural sometimes when you're not live with people. So yeah, I love the presence piece. Okay. And then the fifth one is promise.
Yes, that promise to be engaging, interactive, and be really intentional. Thinking about the presence to the promise, what just popped into my head too was sometimes when we have a group that is on a platform they're not comfortable with, there might be a lot of banter on complaining, and trying to be, sensitive and considerate of that, acknowledge, but also we don't want to focus on what we don't want other people to focus on, and that complaining and negativity, and trying to be supportive but move forward in that positivity. And sometimes that's really needs to be intentional. So that promise to keep learning, keep going with the learning curves, the new technology options, new tools, and try things even if they're not perfect, because we do tend to get set in our ways and what we're comfortable with, where we feel safe, but stretching it so that we reach more of our audience to turn them into participants, and the variety that people like, how they like to receive information as well.
Yeah. And that, like, it's hard sometimes as a speaker. I've seen this in live settings as well. Like, I remember being at a conference a couple of years ago, and for some reason the clicker wasn't working for the speaker. And he spent so much time complaining about that clicker that I lost his message, right?
Yeah.
So like, there's a few things I've learned. One is, and I still occasionally make this mistake, like for me, it's often I've gone over time because I engage the grouping discussion a lot, and I'm like, oh crap, I've got like 20 minutes left in an hour of workshop to get through.
Right.
But they don't know that. Like most of the time when something's going wrong, unless it's something that really is affecting them, they often don't know. And so we don't don't focus on it, and like go with the flow and that sort of thing. So
it's hard though, right? I catch myself too, what I want perfection for myself, even though I say we don't need to be perfect.
Yeah.
So it's self-talk sometimes to myself too, of it's okay. Like,
and you talk about, there was a self-talk tip in here as well. There's so much in the book, so many super practical things. Okay. So I want to know from, if you are here live or in the replay, please let us know, what have you seen that has been awesome in an online meeting, workshop, or conference? What's a tip that you would have? And I'll ask you, Patricia, what are like some of the maybe unknown tips or tips that people sometimes miss that could really level up your online events? What comes to mind for you?
I always say to start with what you have for equipment, but not that long ago, I added a stream deck to my tools, and I'm still growing into using that tool to its maximum potential. But the ability for me to, like, if I ask a question and we can't always fill the silence, and, let people think, but once in a while, if I click my little crickets button at that moment, it's a surprise, and it gets people to laugh and, oh yeah, we're here. Let's,
Yes.
or music at the beginning, and it's those little touches that just add another element, because we may have done that in person anyways, like offline, and just trying to bring as many of those elements as possible. Sometimes people have sent a package ahead of time if it's an ongoing course or series, and they might have a whiteboard that or you can use a piece of paper, but use some physical things too, that it's not all just digital, but get people to be active. And that's another way to get them to turn on their cameras too, is to draw on a whiteboard and put it up in front of the camera, the answer to the the question or whatever. So some of those things, just to keep being creative, and try new things.
Let me see. Is that working?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Putting a tip into practice right now.
Right.
Yes.
That's perfect.
All right. And I see music. Music always helps. Yes.
Yeah.
Having some music playing. So I and this, like so many of your tips will apply to this situation. I have to mention some things I've seen that weren't great in an online event. So there was one online event that I went to, and when you showed up, everyone was on gallery view, and there were a few hosts of this event, and nobody was talking. There was no music. There was nobody talking. And I was just a participant. I was just coming to like hang out. And I actually started engaging people. I was like, hey, I'm here from like outside Toronto. Who else is here? And I started like kind of like hosting the room, because it was so awkward.
It is awkward, that total silence, no music, nothing, not even a slide. I share a story like that in the book too. And I should mention, if anyone feels like, because I've worked with a variety of great clients this last few years with these online shift situations, the stories aren't just about one person. There's no identifying, like it's happened more than once. And it was exactly that too, where I wasn't part of that, it wasn't my place necessarily, but I was just itching, like, how can we be sitting here silently? Like, and then the questions started coming in. Is the sound working? Should we be hearing someone?
Yeah. Is there someone in charge here? Then another, at an event I was at, they took a break. And so when we were in live events, they would call these networking breaks, right? So the speaker would go off, they would usually play music, and there would be a networking break where you would talk to other people at the live event. Well, they called it a networking break.
Yeah.
And then nobody did anything. And I was like, should there be breakout rooms? Should I talk to just this large group of like 150 people? How am I networking right now? And I actually asked the question, like, when you say networking break, what does that mean? And they said, oh, it's just a bio break, so you can like step away. And I was like, oh, so that's not a like, change your terminology. Like, what's my expectation, right? So there are these like details. I think people have like switched from live to online, but not actually thought about the end user, like the guests experience and what that means to them. So
so true. Great examples.
Get the book, people. This will help you think of all the details. So we've been talking a lot about like events and like things that speakers or conference providers would want to think about. A lot of our listeners and watchers are leaders in companies who are like just hosting meetings, or maybe they're like having to speak at an all hands or a like town hall meeting at their company. What are some tips you would give those people who aren't necessarily like speakers? They're doing like, they might be hosting a little meeting or with their team or speaking at these company events. What should they keep in mind?
Yeah, and that's a great point. A lot of the tips are applicable to different contexts, and it doesn't have to be a workshop or learning experience. The meetings that leaders are hopping on, and those key points of not just being talked at, that you are intentional with the interactive aspect, that roundtable introductions or something at the beginning, but really thinking of it being a collaborative space, and giving room, being okay with being quiet so that people turn on their mics, that everybody knows how to turn on their mics, that it's an option with the settings, but just thinking about all of those aspects, and asking for help then too of, okay, I'd like to do this. How do I do it? And in seeking out someone, and there's many of us that do these, help with consulting and facilitating or producing, that to access the resources that you have, whether it's the book or talking to other people, to try new things and make it something that people want to show up for. And an agenda, we talked about that when we were, in person in the same room, physical room. Some of those, it's again, expectations. How is this going to, flow? And just covering as many of those details as possible so that it's great for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, there is a one of the unnatural things that happens in an online meeting is that everyone is on mute unless they're talking, right?
Yeah.
And so we usually say, like, as long as there's less than kind of 12 people in this room,
Right.
let's just unmute so we can hear your background noises. And
Yes.
yeah, like maybe if the dog is barking, you might mute yourself for a couple of minutes, but like, we want to hear the mm-hms and the responses and the reactions to everything. So there are ways to make it feel more natural in this online space, even if you're just not just in a meeting. And we're all in way too many meetings, which could be a whole other other event to talk about. Any final tips or thoughts that you want to share? I'm just going to really encourage you, if you are watching this and going like, okay, I need to get the tips, get the book. So we've shared that. I know I saw that run through the chat, but we will share a link to the Amazon and the Indigo links to get the book. And make sure that you follow Patricia on LinkedIn and YouTube to get all of her latest tips and tutorials. Is there anything that you want to leave the audience with, though?
Definitely be gracious with yourself. Just, keep trying things, use the equipment that you have, build on, definitely have the intention of continuing growing, but knowing that through that learning process, or when you're trying something new, it might not feel perfect. And that's okay. Sometimes people hold themselves back because they want to be perfect and they've got their way they do things, but just keep intentionally challenging yourself, and then to try to engage that person that needs that extra something else to stay present and remember what, the content of your training or meeting.
Yeah, that is so powerful and advice that probably I can take at times too when I start to lean a little bit too far into the perfection zone.
We all do.
Yeah, it's all learning. The technology is always going to change. Every group is different. You can't plan for everything, but you can be prepared, which is step 2, I think. You can be prepared so that when things go wrong, you've done as much as you can to kind of get through it and learn along the way. And have fun, right?
Yeah. Great.
Awesome.
Thank
you so much. Yes, thank you for being here. Thank you to everyone watching the replay or here live. And make sure you follow Patricia to get those tips, get the online shift, and
thank you very much.
learn and have fun.
Yeah.
Thank
you.